for doctors and healthcare providers. Just last week, it was reported that a 10-year-old girl was a rape victim in Ohio. 10 years old. And she was forced to have to travel out of the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the presidency and maybe save her life. That's last part is my judgment. 10 years old. 10 years old. Raped, 6 weeks pregnant, already traumatized, was forced to travel to another state. Imagine being that little girl. I'm serious, just imagine being that little girl, 10 years old.
Let's now shift our focus to abortion rights in America. After the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, one of the things that abortion rights activists feared has come to light. A 10-year-old rape survivor from Ohio had to cross the state lines to get an abortion, as her home state banned the procedure after the Supreme Court ruling. Thousands had protested the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They had asked about the rights of the women who get pregnant, about child rape survivors. The horrific situation occurred last weekend. News reports across the world spoke of how a 10-year-old rape survivor from Ohio was forced to go to Indiana to get an abortion. Ohio does not allow abortions after a heartbeat is detected. Heartbeats can be detected as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy before most women even know that they're pregnant. And this is why the 10-year-old child could not get an abortion in her home state. There are no exceptions for either rape or incest in Ohio. The only exception is if pregnant women are at risk of substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function, I'm quoting. So unless the mother's life could be in danger, Ohio will not allow abortions even for a child who is raped. Beyond World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.
South Dakota that the time is right.
Thousands of low-income women in South Dakota without health insurance could be covered during and after pregnancy if your state expanded Medicaid under Obamacare. This is going to be on the ballot there in South Dakota in November. Will you support that?
I think it's interesting because what that does is make sure that Medicaid expansion would cover able-bodied single individuals that are able to work, and it also would include about an $80 million cost to the state. So that'll be a debate that'll be on the ballot. If it passes, I'll certainly make sure that's implemented fairly and that it's done fairly. It's something that I will continue to look at. That cost to the state is incredible, and the people that it covers are people that are single and able-bodied and able to work. We have many open jobs, very few people in our state that are on unemployment right now. And our incomes are going up faster here in South Dakota than anywhere else in the country. So the people of South Dakota economically are doing better, even though we're really struggling with the inflation of the Biden economy and what's been happening with the policies out of D.C.
Just real quick, it's on the ballot. You're a voter, obviously. Will you vote for it?
I won't be voting for it myself personally because of the tax increases that would have to happen to pay for it. But if it is passed by the people, I certainly will implement it.
So you mentioned your website. Many of the resources on that website are federal programs, private organizations. So I'm just trying to understand, you mentioned paid family leave. What else will you do as governor of South Dakota or push for? I understand you have to do it in partnership with the legislature. Since the state is effectively banning abortion, do you believe the state has a greater responsibility to directly support, financially support with services, women, girls, children?
Well, we do that through many of our agencies already.
And
so there's many different grants and programs that'll do that. And yes, I do believe that we should. I've told the legislature that clearly, that I think that's a debate we need to have on what more we can do to support mothers in this situation. We have many pregnancy centers and those that do walk alongside those mothers today, bringing us ideas. And we'll have that discussion during debate. And it's important to know that 2005 is when the trigger law was passed, saying that when the Supreme Court passed this authority by overturning Roe back to the states, that the law of the land would be then that abortion would be illegal except to save the life of the mother. Now that that's the law, then we have to look at what we need to do to address who in those situations, if they do break the law, is punished, and that's the doctors, not the women. I want to make sure that that's appropriate and that the women are not punished in this situation and that we do support them as we go forward.
Well, let me ask you about that. The Indianapolis Star is reporting that a 10-year-old girl in Ohio who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant now has to travel across state lines to Indiana to receive an abortion. So I just, because this is a trigger law that was passed before you became governor, I wanted you to be clear. Will the state of South Dakota, going forward, force a 10-year-old in that very same situation to have a baby?
You know what I think is incredible, Dana, in this tragic story, because I heard about this last night. What's incredible is that nobody's talking about the pervert, horrible, deranged individual that raped a 10-year-old. And what are we doing about that?
I agree with you.
What are we doing about those
of
individuals
course,
that do this to these
that is
children?
an important discussion to have.
You rape children, that's an issue that the Supreme Court has weighed in as well.
Listen, I totally understand that.
And as much as we talk about what we can do for that little girl, I think we also need to be addressing those sick individuals that do this to our children.
I couldn't agree more. But our bodies are our bodies, and women are the ones who get pregnant. And in this case, it wasn't a woman; it was a girl. Should she have to have a child? A child. Should she have to have that baby?
Every single life is precious. This tragedy is horrific. I can't even imagine. I've never had anybody in my family or myself gone through anything like this. I can't even imagine. But in South Dakota, the law today is that the abortions are illegal except to save the life of the mother.
And you would be okay with that, a 10-year-old girl having to have a baby?
No, I'm never okay with that. In fact, that story will keep me up at night. It absolutely
will.
will.
So will you try to change the law to have an exception
in
a situation like this?
Got a 1-year-old little granddaughter named Miss Addie. I can't even imagine. What I would say is I don't believe a tragic situation should be perpetuated by another tragedy. And so there's more that we've got to do to make sure that we really are living a life that says every life is precious, especially innocent lives that have been shattered like that 10-year-old girl.
Yeah, and it's incredibly complicated, and I get it. But I guess my question is, given how heartbroken you seem to be about the situation, maybe the question is this, because what I keep thinking about is, how is a 10-year-old girl physically probably can't even carry a baby without being, never mind emotionally and mentally sort of tormented, but physically hurt. Would you consider that the life of a mother at risk?
And I think that's something that, that situation, the doctor, the family, the individuals closest to that will make the decisions there for that family. That's what's interesting about the time we live in right now, is every state will have different laws on the books. The decisions will be made by the legislators that are closest to the people. That's appropriate. It's the way our Constitution intended. And I think that South Dakota's laws may look very different than California's, may look very different than New York's, where that governor has said.
We are less than 2 weeks since the Supreme Court overturned the federal right to an abortion. And in many states, the absolute worst case nightmare scenarios are already coming true. As of today, Mississippi's only abortion clinic has closed. And abortion is either outright banned or severely restricted in more than a dozen states. That's already. Both the American College of Rheumatology and the Lupus Foundation say they are aware of reports of patients being unable to access the drug methotrexate, which is used to treat long-term conditions like lupus and arthritis, because it can also be used in high doses or mixed with another drug for a medical abortion. There was also a devastating report out of Ohio, which has been haunting me since I read it, in which a 10-year-old victim of rape, who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant with the child of her rapist, had to travel across state lines to Indiana to secure an abortion because she could not legally access that in Ohio. This is not an abstract case. This isn't a thought experiment of a worst case scenario. This is a real child and a real thing that happened just days after the Supreme Court overturned Roe. And the explicit position of many Republican leaders is that a 10-year-old child should be forced to carry their rapist's baby to term. Just listen to Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine squirm when pressed on the horrifying reality in his state.
I'm assuming that this has been referred to Children's Services. I assume it has also been referred to local, whatever the local law enforcement agency is. We have out there obviously a rapist. We have someone who is dangerous, and we have someone who should be picked up and locked up forever. And again, not knowing all the facts of the case, I'm just assuming that process has in fact been followed.
No, the process has been followed. Well, to make matters worse, Indiana, where this girl secured an abortion legally, is preparing its own abortion ban. Its Republican attorney generals pushing for one without any exceptions, which means that the next elementary school-aged child who becomes pregnant by her rapist in Ohio may not even have the same option of driving to Indiana. But as I said, not every Republican is squirming about this. Some actually think that a 10-year-old should be forced to carry an abuser's child to term. Republican Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, which has also banned abortion without exception, seems to agree with the policy.
What I would say is I don't believe a tragic situation should be perpetuated by another tragedy. And so there's more that we've got to do to make sure that we really are living a life that says every life is precious, especially innocent lives that have been shattered like that 10-year-old girl.
I think it goes without saying that this is just wildly out of line with where the American public is on abortion. Consistent majorities of Americans, around 60% in basically every survey, oppose overturning Roe. According to a recent Monmouth poll, 85% of Americans, 85% think at the very least abortion ban should include exceptions for rape, incest, and in life-saving situations. And according to recent reporting in the Washington Post, Republican candidates are looking for ways to avoid talking about their incredibly unpopular abortion stance, which forces 10-year-old children to give birth on the campaign trail. Well, Democrats, even those governing or campaigning in red states like Governors Roy Cooper of North Carolina and Andy Beshear of Kentucky, Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, they are all going on the offensive on this issue, firmly standing up for abortion rights unapologetically.
So we haven't been living in a post-Roe America for very long, but it's already proven to be a disaster, expectedly so. It's disastrous for women. It's disastrous for doctors. It is truly barbaric. And what I think will be different this time is that women now have access to social media and cell phones that have cameras so they can share their stories. It's not like this is all going to be conducted specifically in the dark. Now, women can take to social media and explain why this ban on abortion affects their lives in a negative way. It impacts their lives in a way that might cause death. So even if that is one benefit to living in the social media era, a detriment could be that women may inadvertently incriminate themselves, because many women will be forced to cross state lines. And with these bounty hunting laws popping up, we don't know if they could be sharing their story as a means of educating, but end up leading to a situation where they're prosecuted. So we don't know how bad this is going to get, but just a couple of weeks in, it's already bad. It's proving to be as barbaric as we anticipated it being. So, as The Hill reports, a 10-year-old girl was denied an abortion in Ohio after the Supreme Court ruled last week that it was overturning Roe v. Wade, demonstrating the tangible impacts that the High Court's decision is having on patients seeking access to the medical procedure. A child abuse doctor in Ohio contacted Dr. Caitlin Bernard, an obstetrician gynecologist in Indiana, after receiving a 10-year-old patient who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, the Indianapolis Star reported. That patient is now heading west to Indiana, given that an abortion ban in Ohio, which prohibits the medical procedure when fetal cardiac activity begins around 6 weeks, had become effective quickly after the High Court issued its decision. Now, pause for a moment. This is why women denounced the 6-week abortion ban in Texas, these fetal heartbeat bills. Because most women don't even know that they're pregnant. And in the instance of this 10-year-old child, she was 3 days too late, forced to cross state lines for healthcare. Why? Because a group of unelected religious zealots on the Supreme Court declared that this isn't actually an inalienable constitutional right. I mean, it's a nightmare. It is a nightmare situation. And what people don't realize is that it's not as simple as, oh, well, I don't want to have a child, I'm going to get an abortion. Even if women have the right to do that because it's their own bodies, most abortions aren't really that simple. Some are required to save a woman's life. And now that's a bit more complicated. Doctors are in this situation where they don't necessarily know what they should or shouldn't be doing. Save a life or potentially deal with the ramifications of a lawsuit, losing my medical license. This is a decision that doctors have to weigh out, and this is how it affected one woman who shared her experience on Instagram. So she showed this horrific image of her bruised stomach, adding, "I'm just gonna leave this here. This is what I look like right now. I almost died last weekend. I feel like less of a woman, all because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I had an ectopic pregnancy, and it was unilaterally decided by a bunch of people who don't even know me that the fetus growing inside of me that never should have been there because I did have birth control was more important than myself. I needed an abortion. I waited for days for surgery because even though my tube ruptured, they weren't allowed to treat me without speaking to lawyers, etc. I lost 1,000 cc's of blood. I had tubes shoved down my throat, and now I'm missing huge parts of myself that will affect me for the rest of my life. I'm devastated and I'm in pain. And if any of you on my feed support this fucked up shit, delete me now, because this is just wrong." So prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned, if a woman had an ectopic pregnancy, which is life-threatening, that fetus is not viable, but before, doctors just did what they needed to do to save that woman's life. In that instance, give her an abortion. But now they can't just intervene and give that patient health care. They have to consult with lawyers. And so when you're in this current legal gray area in states like Louisiana, where a trigger law goes into effect, but it's not technically active for a certain period of time, doctors are left wondering, we don't know what we're supposed to do. So as Greg Sargent of the Washington Post explains, as one provider puts it, the fear of facing extensive jail time and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines if medical professionals interpret the law incorrectly will lead to patients being turned away for care that they desperately need. Similarly, an emergency room practitioner testifies that medical emergencies related to pregnancy will be much harder to evaluate. Medical pros will be working under threat of prosecution for making critical life-saving decisions about how to treat patients with dangerous pregnancies and miscarriages. Still, another warns that doctors will be reluctant to direct patients to seek emergency treatment amid pregnancy complications for fear of being accused of attempting to induce abortion, possibly resulting in patient death. And one gynecologist testifies to the fear that doctors will feel forced to refuse necessary appropriate care to avoid prosecution. She notes that it's unthinkable that she may be forced to choose between my patients and my liberty. And this is healthcare we're talking about. These doctors entered the field to save lives, and now they're in a situation where legally they may not be able to intervene and save these lives. This is barbaric. Civilized countries do not subject doctors and patients to this. Civilized societies take care of people. They not only allow for abortion because it is healthcare, but they don't even put the burden on patients. I mean, think about this. In the United States, healthcare in this country is cost prohibitive. So a lot of people who want to seek out medical care might not be able to because they don't have insurance, or maybe they do have insurance, but they can't afford the copays. So we don't even have universal healthcare. And now we're forcing women to give birth. We don't even offer paid maternity and paternity leave. And now we're forcing people to give birth. What a pathetic country that we live in. What a pathetic, embarrassing country that we live in. Why? Why is this being forced upon all of us? Because just 5 unelected religious zealots chose that this is how it has to be now. That states can ban something that we all grew up knowing as a constitutional, inalienable right. And it's not like these red states weren't chipping away at the right to an abortion, over-regulating abortion clinics, trying to find ways to chip away at it. Death by 1,000 cuts. But now it's over. We're firmly in the post-Roe era, and women are going to die. Women are going to die. And it's been a couple of weeks, and this is already happening. This is already a nightmare. Now, I want to go to an article from Newsweek. We're not going to dive into it, but this article profiles the owner of Mississippi's last abortion clinic, which of course was forced to close down. And it talks about Diane Durzis, who owned this clinic. And she explains that abortions, they affect everyone, including families that you wouldn't necessarily expect it to affect, i.e. evangelicals, because these homeschooled, overly sheltered children aren't given proper sex education, which of course leads to unwanted pregnancies, because abstinence-only education simply does not work. It is a proven failure. And she even discusses how patients tell her that they're against abortion while they're having the procedure. And you'd be surprised how common it is for so-called pro-life, i.e. forced birthers, and evangelicals to actually get abortions, because they think, well, my case is different. I'm unique. I'm against abortion, but in this instance, I needed it because of health reasons, or I needed it because this was one mistake that I didn't want to make. A lot of evangelicals, they get abortions too. They won't admit it, but they do get abortions, and Diane is confirming that because it's different for them, right? All these other women, they're just casually being, risky, having promiscuous, unprotected sex, and that's why they're getting pregnant. It's their fault. It's not my fault though, so I should be able to have an abortion. Except this is an issue that is going to affect every single person, directly or indirectly. You may be a man who can't get an abortion or get pregnant, but understand that this will still affect you. You have a sister, a daughter perhaps, a significant other who may one day need an abortion. And in some way or another, this will touch every single American. This is going to ruin lives. This is going to end lives. So I don't know what else to say about this situation. We predicted it would be a disaster, and it is a disaster. And a really good point that Cenk Uygur made about bodily autonomy is that we value bodily autonomy so much that the right to bodily autonomy is almost universally recognized. I mean, think about this. This is really about saving lives, right? They consider fetuses human beings. Once it becomes a human being, full baby, they don't care. But, these abortions must be stopped because we've got to save lives. Okay, well, do we force people to give up kidneys? Do we force people to donate blood against their will? No, we don't do that because the right to bodily autonomy is something that as human beings we acknowledge is something that we should protect. But not women. And it's because we never respected women in this country. They didn't get the right to vote until the 1920s. We don't value them as equal human beings. We've always perceived them culturally and legally as inferior to men. And this is just being enshrined in law now because of these religious zealots on the Supreme Court. As society advances and moves forward and acknowledges that abortion is something that is necessary in a civilized society, they're taking us backwards because they never valued women, because their religious doctrine dictates that women are unequal to men. Women were created out of the ribcage of Adam. Eve was a part of Adam. So she's just like an appendage to him, not a full human with her own autonomy and desires and right to life as well. So this is the United States of America.
All new tonight at 6, Sin TV is revealing that despite claims otherwise, a Columbus abortion clinic is still offering services. Ohio's law allows abortions before 6 weeks, and they are continuing tonight. Sin TV's Brittany Bailey is live with the confusion on social media that is causing some confusion tonight. Brittany.
Well, Andrew, it all started with a Facebook post earlier this week and continued today with an email to our newsroom. The claim was that all Planned Parenthood locations in Ohio has stopped providing all abortions. But we did some digging and found out that just isn't true. This was the announcement followers of anti-abortion group Created Equal saw this week. Along with that was what seemed to be an online booking appointment window for the Planned Parenthood North Columbus Health Center, saying, "We are not currently providing abortions at Ohio health centers." And an email from Created Equal Thursday morning proclaimed that news with a bold headline. But we're told this all comes down to a Planned Parenthood website issue.
There was a technical glitch on our system that was not generated from our state providers. So we have rectified the situation, and we are very sorry for our patients who received a wrong message through our online system. What's important is that Planned Parenthood doors are open and that Ohioans can still get an abortion up to 6 weeks or the detection of fetal tones.
Still, Created Equal is questioning that technical glitch explanation, suggesting there was a change in position without providing evidence of that. And the group's Facebook post is still active. Planned Parenthood advocates say this all is part of Created Equal's plan to spread misinformation.
There has been a concerted effort for many years in the state of Ohio to confuse people who are seeking abortion care. And unfortunately, we have to deal with organizations like Created Equal that spend all of their resources ensuring that instead of making sure Ohioans get accurate care and access to health care, that instead they only get the information coming from their really zealot personal views.
Now, we did offer an interview to the president of Created Equal multiple times today, but he never took us up on that offer. And again, we just want to be clear that right now, Planned Parenthood Ohio is still performing abortions here in our state under the parameters of the current law. Reporting live in downtown Columbus tonight, Brittany Bailey, 10 TV News.